Good morning all, and thanks for joining us for the webinar today on how do you deal with a wrong hire. I'm Savita from People Matters, and I'm going to walk you through the agenda for today's webinar. We have the privilege of having with us Seema Arora Nambiar, Senior Director, People Resources, McDonald's India, West and South region. First of all, I'd like to give you a brief on the tier leadership that we have in place. It's an initiative which is specially designed for the tier leaders, helping them take recruitment to the next level. This league is a combination of a bunch of activities like the newsletter, master classes, like this one, twangouts, half-day events and awards. Just to give you a brief on the webinar, this masterclass is going to focus on how to identify if a hired candidate is a misfit for the profile and what are the various ways of tracking and dealing with such cases. A little about our today's speaker. Seema focuses on enhancing the employer brand image of McDonald's, both internally and externally. She helps build the talent pipeline across the organization, also manages the human resource, training, learning and development, and the admin function for the company. The sponsors for today's webinar for helping us make this happen are Hewitt, which has been a leader in design and implementation of reliable pre-employment selection and assessment. And we have Cornerstone On Demand, which is a global leader of cloud-based talent management software solutions. Over 14.5 million users across 191 countries rely on Cornerstone's cloud-based application to recruit, train, manage, connect people across organizations. We have saved time for you to ask questions at the end of the webinar. So for those watching us live, just stay tuned and submit your questions at any point in time during the presentation through the question and answer section, and we'll try to answer how many ever that we can take if time allows. We have a full exciting agenda for us today, and Seema will take a lead. Without any further delay, I'm going to hand over the microphone to Seema.
Thanks, Savita. Thank you so much for that introduction. Welcome to everybody who's on this conference. And without much ado, I think let's just kick it off. It's my first time online on a WebEx, so it's going to be interesting, and I hope we don't have any technology issues. So what we're really talking about is salvaging an oh-no decision, and I think all of us have gone phases where that happens. As HR professionals, I think, when I took over HR, to me, that was my biggest fear. That what happens if you hire the wrong person, you're always supposed to have the right answers. The bottom line, if you look at, at recruitment, hiring mistakes will always happen. And there is a reason for them to happen. Let's just take a quick look. One is the simple fact that we need to fill the position quickly. Having metrics like, turnaround times, how long did it take to fill the position for your acquisition team will very often lead to wrong hires happening. In conjunction with having a very rigid budget, you will see that a large part of the acquisition that goes wrong would be insufficient talent intelligence, which is related to the budgets that we put together. Find there is also the reference checks, and this is something that's also an emerging area in India as we're getting into more detailed hiring. You really don't have the background checks available online that you would get in the West. So this becomes a very, very critical factor to actually justify whether the hire that you've made is correct or not correct. At McDonald's, we've had a few stories of when we've actually gone back to do the background verifications post-hire. There have been issues that have come up in documentation. So it is important to ensure that if this is completed as a process. And find, there is obviously that percentage that say that it just didn't work out. Now, when you look at, what is the result of a hiring mistake, very early on when we were really, really small, we actually had very few people in the corporate office, and we were looking for someone to come in and look at training. Now, at McDonald's, training is something that's very specifically ingrown or homegrown. But because we were small and we didn't have the bandwidth internally to pull people out from the operations group, we actually recruited an external person. To me, that was my first learning of what is the cost of a bad hire. So the gentleman hired ultimately stayed with us for almost about 12 months. It was expensive because you paid his total salary. You had to maintain the guy because he was a trainer who ended up purchasing stuff that he'd asked you to because you trusted he would know decisions. Finally, the biggest one, which to me always has the impact, is that it just leaves a really, really bad blood within the organization. So I remember when this man turned over, or when we actually had to finally ask him to go, he actually deleted our the entire data that he had brought into the company from the hard disk because he was just so disgruntled. And at this point, that was the first realization we had, that if you've made the wrong hire, it is important for you to be able to identify early on and then resolve the issue. So today we'll just go through quickly as what is the how do you identify a wrong hire? Is it really about the cultural piece, or is it a transfer skill problem? How do you track a newly onboarded candidate through the 33 and 90-day module? What time frame would you give for a candidate to improve? And finally, who is accountable for the non-performance and what steps should you take? So who is responsible to hire? And this has been an interesting question that I think I've seen in a lot of organizations where the blame really, floats between HR and line function. The beauty of it is a partnership. The core responsibility of the acquisition process, which means whether this has been followed, whether the process has been followed, will always be human resources. However, the responsibility of the new hire and the responsibility of the new joinee, the immediate line boss, is what we actually follow from a McDonald's perspective. So we do not actually take, it is a joint decision. In every interview that we do, depending on the layer, there will be an HR person that sits in. But the boss remains the primary decision maker. So whenever we use assessments, HR gives you, we do not use assessments as selection or rejection. We use them as add-ins from a behavioral cultural fit point. This just makes sure that there is a very strong clarity on, for HR to say, finally is the boss that works on it, they have to take the ownership of the individual. From the boss's point of view, that they have had the choice. And when you will partner and monitor it. When it comes down to evaluation, it is always the functional boss, and the responsibility of HR would always be to ensure there is a transition plan which runs through the first 90 days of the person coming in. What are the early warning signs that you look for? And I'm sure all of us have actually gone through this. So one of the things that at least I look for as I walk around the office is very, very clearly and see as to how much are new people on social media during office time versus actually kind of encourage their curiosity about the company. This is probably your first time that they haven't really gotten into the organization. They haven't really understood what they're supposed to do. Such as you start seeing immediate attendance problems, so issues that haven't been talked about when they hire on. For you to be able to see, so they haven't told you they were on holidays, but you start seeing punctuality issues. They come in late, leave early. These are all signs that the person is probably not a fit for your organization. The I need guy, which is also the guy who will always find external reasons why they can't or are unable to do the job. So the last, in my entire HR career of recruitment, and I think I've had about 15% in wrong hires. Normally, where you will see the wrong hires is at entry level, because that's where you're always hiring the largest number. And I think you just get better at being able to identify within the first 90 days whether the person is going to fit or not fit. People who will tell you that somebody didn't give me information, or I was not made to feel comfortable, or I went there but they didn't talk to me. Normally people you see who are going to struggle to fit in with your company. The sign is really when you look at people who talk about my old job and largely have not made the mental and emotional transition from their old company to your new company. Since we are a company that has first jobbers, as people actually exit our company, I've always told them that you have to know the difference between a wife and a girlfriend. You don't one to the other, and I think it's really difficult to understand. If people are starting to that comparison, they just haven't fitted in with you. The assertion overdrive, which is we look for people when they join in to be able to absorb and understand organizational climate and the way that an organization does things. If someone is normally loudly assertive and very, very firm around what they want to do in the first 90 days, you will see that it is normally coming out of them not even wanting to understand the culture of the organization. So these are very, very clear-cut signs that people are not fitting into your organization. And ultimately, there are, if you look at the whole bucket, there are two specific reasons why you would fit people in out of the organization. This, to me, has always been a non-negotiable. It is company blueprint. If you look at all of the 5 reasons that we talked about above, are more related to culture fitment rather than it being to the transferable skills gap. Right? The second piece is normally easier to deal with, but if there is a first one, what you need to understand is it needs to get fixed immediately. Right? There is a reason why we put probationary periods into appointment letters. It is to ensure that the first 90 days you're evaluating if the person's a cultural fit or company. As we saw third slide, there are huge implications to companies if you have the wrong hire for an extended period of time, because it just ends up causing a derailment within the existing company, because a lot of the better employees are expected to pick up slack, especially if they are more expensive and mid-level employees. So if you find a cultural misfit, it needs immediate severing. You need to excise the probationary period, and you need to talk to the functional boss. The discussion, and we'll know who has to really have the discussion, but this identification becomes super important. In case there's a trouble skills issue, there are ways to recover this one. So you need to build further rigor into the transition plan. Monitor against very, very specific deliverables. A large number of them, especially when you recruit at mid to senior levels, the assumption is that the person will have the requisite transferable skills to marry it with the organization or the industry level skills that are required. There could be a mismatch. Person hasn't really understood. Size of organizations also matter. And as going into as we're seeing companies going or galloping into the larger growth cycles from entrepreneurial companies, the ability, they may have similar job profiles, but their ability to scale on the processes becomes the big issue. And hence, deliverables being specific becomes really critical. Frequency of monitoring also another critical one. Invest your time, new hires, right at the start, and in informal sessions, you will see a result on that one. And very specific feedback on the task. This is not about personality statements. This is really about being able to ensure that people are being given specific feedback on the task that they were expected to deliver, and hence ensuring they are clear on their actual versus deliverables. What steps that you follow? Once you're building more rigor into the transition plan, the responsibility of a 90-day journey is the boss's. It is not just HR will partner to monitor. The regular of the task by immediate manager, you have to evaluate initiatives and complete from a completion of task point of view. Specificity in this becomes super critical, because the more specific you can make an outcome, it gives the individual quick wins. It also shows you their ability to ensure that they understand what they need to do, and their ability to get you a tangible result. You need to review achievement orientation, and like we talked about the 5 signs of a person not having settled down. You look at whether they're actually, fighting to achieve, but very clearly distinguish between effort and outcome. You need to be able to formally document anything that's low enthusiasm or a poor attitude from the employee. All of this should be documented. What is HR's role? It's essentially responsible for reviewing the transition plan with the boss and doing follow-up orientation with the employee. You are the bipartisan member of the company. Keeping a balance between both the people who are involved in this relationship becomes very, very critical. So understanding whether the boss has followed all steps and all that the employee has understood those steps, as well as keeping a what is the documentation that's been put in, becomes really, really critical. Fine, look at it. As a post-completion of the 90 days, what should you do? This is the classical that we all get stuck on. There's a lot of emotionality that goes into this, because most people feel, it's only been 90 days. Should we give more time? Should we actually be able to, just wait a little longer? It's the boss's fault. Making sure that a 90-day plan is succinct is extremely critical. The final review in the 90 days should be done jointly between the HR team and the boss. If the candidate has delivered, you go back to the original performance plan, document it, ensure that there's clarity, and the individual knows that they are now good to go. In order there is a fitment or a level issue, you may realize that you've taken someone from a smaller organization expecting them to do a larger role, but they just need to go down level. Have a clear conversation on the performance basis where you expect it and where the person is at. What helps at stage is if you have a clear-cut job description and you're able to link it to the tasks that the person was asked to do. You or an alternate role that may be a better fit. In case there is no availability in the organization or the individual is not ready, simply part ways amicably. The last fitment that the last issue we had was actually discovered within the last 90 days or the first 90 days, and it was interesting because when we had conversations, so we followed all the steps I just talked through, and before we had to ask the employee to actually go, he came up to me and said that, you know what, I'm actually grateful for the process because I just realized that I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. And the role that I want to do is essentially become an entrepreneur. And he actually has gone into farming, which was really brilliant because he just said, you know what, this helped me discover that it's not something I can do, and the honesty helped. And to me, I think that's probably the biggest, I would say the biggest gift that we get if you are actually able to hold people to account for the jobs that they need to do, review them regularly, give them the feedback, and essentially make up early on. The longer you will stretch, there will be acrimony both not between the employee and the boss, but there will also be acrimony that will spread to the rest of the team as well as to the rest of the company. So it is important, make the call. It's all right. It doesn't matter if you have a certain amount. The cost in the long run will be a lot more if you let it stay on. Thank you very much for listening to me. It's been a really rapid 20 minutes, and I'd be happy to answer questions. Savita, back over to you.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to hear you. We do have some questions with us. One that Jayashree has asked was during your presentation, which you have already covered, but I'm not sure if you'd like to elaborate on that bit. Who should we hold responsible for monitoring in 90-day journey? Is it HR or line manager, which you have answered? If both, what's the level of engagement of HR in the acclimation of new employees?
So, Lakshan, it is extremely important for HR to be able to hold both sides. The toughest part in this is to stay unbiased in your hearing, right? So it is important to have a follow-up orientation with the employee to be able to understand that they've gotten all the steps that were promised, which you should be discussing with the line manager. So without completely involved, it's important that line manager does understand the cost of investment in a new acquisition. Very, very often HR is holding the baby because we don't make a strong enough point for line managers to understand that people do cost money beyond just compensation. So you have to be able to engage both sides, but the final accountability is the line manager. So one of the we do is in our performance reviews, all line managers have a section which is almost a 20% weightage given to that development and how they actually evolve their teams. So it's not necessarily only about how much they will do to their KPIs. It is also about what they're doing to ensure that the teams are successful. So you've actually managed the accountability directly with their measurements.
Thank you. We have one question from Ashish Banka, who is asking, how do you assess, a campus interview where candidate has no prior experience at all and has greater relativity of higher attrition rate?
Sorry, repeat the question.
How do you, during campus interviews where candidate has no prior experience and has, the relativity of attrition is a lot higher there. So how can one hire or a misfit in that case?
So one of the beauties with first jobbers is the fact that it's simply that they have no experience, so they're honestly like actually just you can write all in because they're empty pages, right? So at that level, assessing cultural fitment becomes more critical versus functional skills. Each company you're hiring campus, I'm assuming, has strong orientation and training processes within the company. If you're able to assess the cultural fitment and to some degree leadership capabilities, those two things put together should be able to give you almost about a 70 to 80% comfort or a viability on whether those people will be successful in the position. You're looking for bigger anchors in campus. You're not looking for functional skill base.
Right. We have another question now. This is, I'm sure, related to what you have said, but she wants to know a little more about this question is from Muthu Lakshmi. Can you share a few McDonald's best practices in creating the best onboarding experience for the employee in the first 30 days? I'm sure this will reflect in your attrition also.
Yeah, so we end up doing, so there are two different things. So onboarding at the restaurant and onboarding in the corporate office are two different experiences. However, both have one thing in common, which is we ensure that everybody has a taste of what it means to run a restaurant. So anybody rooted into the business has to spend a minimum of 15 days in the restaurant working side by side with the crew to understand the complexity of running a McDonald's restaurant. So that, I think, is one of our biggest best practices because it gives them, even if I'm an engineer in construction, I have to understand what I do and how it impacts the business every time I make a decision. I think the biggest other piece is the time that's spent with the line manager, my transition plan that's actually planned and evaluated on a regular basis, which kind of says, okay, I need you to spend X amount of time, this is my outcome. The third piece is your transition plan, being able to spend time with interdependent functions. So for example, in product development, being able to spend time with equipment, being able to spend time with operations, being able to spend with marketing to understand what are the interdependencies and how does that relate to my function. What you're trying to do in this 90 days is really give them as much input on what are the things that will impact their decisions or their ability to make decisions on the on the ground. The part which I found really, really valuable is being able to tell people the decisions they can take. What are the levels? Where do you need to go back to bosses? Where do we need to make the calls on their own? The minute you do find people are much quicker on the uptake in onboarding, as against if you don't. The piece, especially from the restaurant point of view, is being able to give training which relates both to the expected behavior and also the functional pieces on floor. So following the 70-20-10 part when you're training, getting them on floor, agile development, getting them to absolutely just jump into the thick of things. So these are three big points that I feel help us from an onboarding perspective.
Right. We have one question which has come in my inbox. Identifying a wrong hire, which you have mentioned the parameters that you have covered. Is it different for different industries? For example, the question is coming from someone who's from the manufacturing industry. So there it's a slight concern.
So I don't think it will be different. Like I said, there are two basic reasons why you'll have a wrong hire. One is the skill piece, the other one is the cultural fit. In cases, if you have a skill issue, you will try and see if you can use that skill elsewhere, purely because, it's a judgment call, that the person's probably oversold or undersold and has not really understood where the role is. But I don't know if it's different in different industries. I think these are the two basic issues you'll find everywhere.
Right. We are at 11:28, but we still have a couple of questions. I want to take this one. This is from Jayashree. She's asking, how do you deal with wrong hires? How do you deal with hires who are slow in ramping up as per training plan, but are really great in their attitude and their cultural fit? Now there is a follow-up question to this. What if the firm wants to keep them, but thinks capability will continue to be an issue?
So this is the hardest one to deal with because, nice person that's not able to ramp up. I think the second step, which is when you're having a discussion with the individual around their capabilities, it is about being honest. Right? And most of us know off the ball whether they'll be able to scale or not. Fitment at a level or at a slightly junior level would be the offer you would make. People on because they're only a cultural fit and they're not going to ramp up is normally suicidal. It's because there will be angst that builds up over a period of time. They will start to resent it. Not into it. They will start to resent the fact that they're not growing, especially as the junior people starting to move up faster.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll start having other issues.
Right. I want you to, I know we are running a little behind time, but with this last question, okay, Saswati wants to know from your experience, what are the essential parameters that goes into a study for a sturdy recruitment matrix? Anything in your experience says that, these are two or three key points that one should bear in mind?
So this is always a good one. I mean, I've always had this debate with a lot of people saying, how do you actually evaluate the recruitment team? I think it is important to track that. It is important to track where these people are coming from. But I think the third piece is actually evaluating their ability to acclimatize on the role, which is more qualitative. So the accountability of 90 days, beyond just the forms, is to be able to see how people's performance ends up being on the first 90 days as feedback from the line managers. Honestly, I don't think recruitment is always qualitative than it is quantitative. You can keep pushing people to give you TAT and within budget, but what that only ends doing is it ends up stunting their ability to get the person. So one of the things I keep telling my acquisition team is, do not talk to me about a budget, talk to me about fitment to the role. So the right job description, give me a resume that fits that job description. So expensive, then you need to come back and tell me it's going to be more expensive. But try and fit a round peg into a square hole. From a metrics point of view, it's really, really tough to put numbers to this. But I said, lead measures, do keep that as a measure because you will know. The third piece is keep the, where are they getting people from? With the advent of social media and, the kind of stuff now available, you want to know if your acquisition team is doing due diligence in actually reviewing people's portfolio profiles and not just taking what a consultant is giving them. So it's important to also assess that.
Right. I know we are at the time, but I have a request from one of the participants to answer this question from your side. So we have Annie who has a question. What do you do when the HR says no to a hire, but the same still happens due to the whims and fancies of the respective HOD? Now, it is put to, does the 30, 60, 90 take care of it?
We'll have to. So what we practice is we generally go with the line manager. We do document our concerns. So there have been times where I've very strongly been against the candidate. Line manager has insisted on going with the candidate. I've made sure that I've documented the concerns. It has been scaled up to the line manager's boss, saying, look, disputed decision. However, we're going with this. I will hold the line manager accountable. These are the 5 reasons why I don't agree. Bottom line is the line manager has to understand it is their investment. They come around and say, and the flip of that becomes you have to be very, very cautious on how you're reviewing performance. And, so there are times where you're surprised. There are times where you're proven right. So it's important to be able to stay objective about that. But do not take the decision for them.
Right. Seema, we have many questions, but, with this question and answer session, we will have to wrap up today's webinar. Once again, thank you very much, Seema, for being there, and thank you to Aon Hewitt and Cornerstone On Demand for helping us put this up together. Once again, very, very big thank you, Seema, for sharing your valuable thoughts over the topic today. This is one topic which is not much spoken about. Most of the HR fraternity wants to resent and change the topic of how do you deal with the wrong hire, and you have come up with great ideas on what you do at McDonald's. Thank you very much on that. And I would like to thank every webinar audience for giving such wonderful questions. I know there are a few more unanswered. We'll try and take them offline. But thank you once again, Seema. That concludes the webinar webcast today. Thank you very much, and each one of you have a great week ahead. Good day. Bye-bye.